Hey guys, you might be wondering, why is this big dumb oven still taking up most of my workbench, completely in the way? And better yet, why is it on? Well, the reason why is because I actually have been trying to sell this oven, and turns out there's not much interest in it. I knew that this was a very expensive oven when it was new. The problem is its age. Because it's got so much age, nobody who would use this oven in its original purpose, which was, I believe, semiconductor wafer fabrication, wants to touch this thing with a 10-foot pole. So I'm kind of stuck with it, unless somebody else wants to take it for another purpose. But the only way they do that is if they took it at a very, very low price, which at some point I could take the controller out of this thing and sell the controller on eBay, which is easy to ship, for more money than probably what they'd be willing to give me for the whole oven. And then I could scrap the rest of it, and since it's all high-grade stainless steel, there's a few bucks in that. But I got a better idea. Maybe, just maybe, I'll just keep the thing. And I'll use it for things like preheating metal before I weld it. This doesn't have a high enough max temperature to be like ideal for preheating cast iron, for instance. But just for like preheating metal a little bit to take the edge off, seems to be fine for that. And the other thing I found that I can do with it, which is kind of cool, which had occurred to me, you know, I was working on that grinder, and I got to a point where I kind of cleaned it up and I was ready to start sanding and painting some of the components. Problem is, I don't like to paint down here in the shop because the fumes just kind of stay here and just kind of fog me out. And if they don't stay here, they go up to the first floor, and the wife isn't happy about that. So I paint outside when I can. Problem is, it's March, so it's been too cold outside, and we got snow on the ground outside, so it makes it kind of difficult to paint out there. Plus, the temperature out there is staying below, even on a mild day like today where it reached up into like low 40s, it's still not warm enough for really painting stuff and letting it dry out there. Or is it? So here's the thing I came up with. I heat the items in this oven, the parts I'm going to prime, I heat them up in the oven to 150 degrees. Then I grab them out of the oven, run out the bulkhead, put them out there, I spray them with the primer. The primer dries real quickly because of the fact that the surface temperature is 150 degrees of the part, or roughly that. I mean, it cools off as soon as I get it out there, the temperature starts dropping. But it actually dries. The primer is fast drying anyways, but it dries really quick. I then grab the parts as soon as they're dry enough to handle, bring them back down here, and throw them back in the oven, and bring the temperature back up and finish drying them. And what I'll do is I'll do that on all the parts that I prime, and then I'll do that on all the parts that I paint. And I think what I'm going to end up with is probably a pretty decent coating of paint on there that's pretty durable. At least that's the theory. We'll see. I mean, what the heck. And I'll find a more permanent spot for this in the shop, probably down the other end of the basement, because it's not going to be something I'm going to use all the time. The problem is I don't have any 220 volt down that end. My 220 volt's all down this end. So I just rigged up a temporary cord, and I'm running it off a 220 volt circuit over there because this is a 220 volt up. So anyways, let's open this up and see what the stuff looks like. So I had dropped the temperature down. It's actually set at 98, but it only came down to 118, and it's kind of holding at 118, and that's because I inadvertently hit some of these buttons here, and I haven't quite figured out how to use this controller yet. I did find instruction book online, but this thing is capable of doing so many things: ramp up, hold at a certain temperature, and then ramp down in steps and do all kinds of crazy stuff like that, which I don't need it to do. So right now this stuff is probably at 118 degrees, but 118 degrees isn't too bad. Just to give you an idea though. So that's completely dry now. The lighting over here is kind of bad. That fluorescent light isn't working very well, but trust me, this actually is working out the way I expected it would. Beats having the stuff sit down here in the basement and flash rust.
Hey everybody, I decided to get back to work on this Hammond grinder. Just kind of tired of it not being completed. The other reason I want to get it done is because I've got that other Hammond grinder that I acquired. I'm going to be moving that down here to the basement. That's going to become probably a winter project. At some point, I'll see if I can get that to fire up, and if that grinder looks promising, then I might just offer this one up for sale, because I don't need two of them. I haven't decided yet exactly which one I'm going to keep or whatever. This one was modified, the other one's missing parts, so neither one of them is exactly a complete as original Hammond grinder. Anywho, I finally got around to cleaning up and priming and painting some of the other parts, at least enough of the parts so that I can put it together to the point with the new bearings in there to see whether or not those new bearings are going to fly. So I don't remember where we left off in the discussion about this, but I had acquired these new bearings. These are brand new Asian cheapo bearings, but they're brand new. So they should be an improvement over what was in there. But I noticed that they feel nice and smooth, but they feel a little not tight really, but I kind of have a suspicion there might be an issue where they might not allow this thing to start up correctly. I don't know. And actually, now that I think of it, I'm just spinning them now, I do recall it. Yeah, actually that bearing does have a little bit of a jingle to it, and for a grinder, I'm kind of surprised. But these are the exact same part number as what was in there. They're 5204Zs. These are fully shielded too, which is an improvement over, I think, what was in there. What was in there was a bearing that apparently by design you were supposed to be able to use this Zerk fitting to force grease into it. But I had a question from the beginning about, well, where the heck does the grease then go on the inside? And it turns out, I think the ones that are in here are fully shielded, so I don't know if these have been changed from the originals and they just stopped using this. But I originally, when I got this thing, I tried putting grease in here, and of course the grease just collected in here and went nowhere because it's a fully shielded bearing. I've decided that I'm not going to use these bearings, and the reason why is because there's obviously something wrong with this bearing. Even though it's a brand new bearing, I guess, you know, because it's a cheap Asian bearing, I didn't get lucky. This bearing feels good. It's nice and smooth. If I give it a quick spin, it comes to a stop fairly quickly because of the grease that's inside of it, which is what I would expect. This one, on the other hand, is acting completely differently. It makes this noise. It sounds horrible. In fact, the original bearings that are in here, I'm not saying they're the original to the machine, because I do think they were changed, like I said, because these are double shielded bearings that are in here now. But the point is, the bearings that were in here when I got the machine actually feel better and sound better than one of these brand new Asian ones. I stand corrected. It's been a while since I worked on this, so I kind of forgot. This bearing on this side that I took out, this was the bearing that was in here when I got the machine. It's shielded on this side. It's open on the back. Huh. So, a lot of sense that makes. So I gotta figure that maybe this was meant to be in this way, so the shielded side would keep the grease being pumped in there from getting into the armature. That's kind of weird. So this one is a hot mess. I'm gonna replace this one with the good sounding Asian bearing, which is double shielded. And then the one that's on this side, I could see it shielded on this side, and when I look at the back, I could see it shielded on the back. So that's a fully shielded bearing. So that's the one that I'm gonna keep.
I'm not gonna change it all.
That's a real light press fit, the OD. I'd go even as far as to say that's almost a slip fit. I think I'm gonna have to press these onto the shaft of the rotor and then slide that in this way. See, now this is the problem when I take too long of a break from a project.
I was going to put this back in, and my first thought was, it's not going to make a difference which way I put this in. But then I realized, oh, wait a minute, this end looks different than this end. This end's actually got a hole drilled in it, probably to help balance it. So I think it is kind of important that I know which end this goes in. I must have planned ahead at some point, because I marked with a Sharpie a number 1 on this side and a number 2 on this side. I'm sure I probably marked these with a 1 and a 2 also to correspond to these numbers. And lo and behold, I can't find any numbers on here. I cleaned these thoroughly and sanded them, and it looks like maybe I didn't put the number on the inside where I should have. So that's kind of worrying me. I think these two covers are identical. So really, it's not a matter of which cover goes on which end. It's a matter of which cover goes on, or which end of this goes on which end of this. So I went and tried to look at my videos, and of course, much to my surprise, I only have Hammond Grinder Part 2 up so far. And I don't even take this apart. This section here doesn't even come apart in that. So I think I must have shot video and of me disassembling this and covering all of that I never ended up having enough video to complete an episode. And I probably was planning on putting that up in part 3. But at some point, I remember I did have a mishap where I lost some files. And I think I inadvertently lost that video. So I don't have the video of me actually taking this section right here apart. I have the video. The last thing I did in part 2 really was I pressed out that post that goes in here. And I did some playing around on the bench with just running it and determining which winding was a start winding and run winding, and I have all of those diagrams. So I'm all set as far as wiring goes. I'm not worried about that. But I'm a little perplexed about which way I should put this in. All right, so I put only 2 of the long through bolts that pull this all together in. I put them diagonally across from each other. I'm not going to put all 4 in yet until I test run it. I want to hear how it sounds. I also only put 1 cap on the end here because the cap doesn't really do too much from what I could tell. Doesn't appear to be actually designed to hold that bearing in, really. Or maybe it does. But I don't think that bearing's going to want to come out. I think I can run it with that off. So I've got to determine the wiring again here. I get the 4 wires. I got to see which one's the start and which one's the run winding. And I remember I wrote down the resistances when I measured them so I could tell which was which. All right, I believe I've identified the correct winding for the run winding. Not going to bother with the start winding and the capacitor at this point. I'm just going to start it by hand like I did in the earlier video. That's interesting. Alright, I'm going to try this again. This time I've got the run winding, what I originally had labeled as a run winding, hooked up across the line. I've got one end of what I believe was start winding on there, so I should be able to touch this and get that to start. Awfully noisy. Man, that doesn't sound good at all. Wow, I just took the cap off here, and this brand new bearing is spitting out oil. I mean, grease. It's puking out its grease. That is messed up. So check that out. Brand new Chinesium bearing. It's puking its grease out on both sides. Well, the only thing I have is, besides the originals, is I have the other Chinesium one. The one that sounded to me like it doesn't have enough grease in it. Oh, what the heck. That one's doing the same thing. Try it with the original bearings back in there. This bearing started to make noise and is heating up. I'm gonna have to bite the bullet and buy some quality bearings for this thing. Alright, so the other night I was over here messing with these bearings and disappointed to see this happening. And so I went on the Practical Machinist website and I went into the section on rebuilding machines, and I asked the question about these bearings, what the thoughts were, the general consensus. I did get a couple of replies, and one of the replies was that somebody had basically said that they never really had much luck with these Chinese import bearings, that the last pair that they had come in were not correct dimension. Well, that's interesting because these seem to be slipping on and off the shaft pretty easily and slipping in and out of the bearing housing very easily, indicating to me that these are also not exactly what they should be. I'm gonna check these in a second, but that makes me wonder whether or not they're able to, I'm gonna exaggerate it, but if they're able to cock like this slightly and not be in proper alignment, that could be a part of the problem. Also, this tends to indicate that they're probably overpacked with grease, that there shouldn't be that much grease in these. So, long and the short of it is, the suggestion is either buy good quality Fafner or SKF bearings, or the other suggestion was just use a needle pick to remove the shield on the original Hoover bearings that were in there, and clean them thoroughly and pack them with new grease. And I think I'm going to do that, because good quality, even if I find like new old stock on eBay Good quality bearings are going to run me about 18 bucks a piece, so I'm going to be sinking $36 into this grinder, which I may not even end up keeping. So I think I'm going to do that. And as for these bearings, all right, so scratch that plan of reusing these bearings, because I ran these through the parts washer and did my best to clean them out. And a couple of things I noticed when I spin them, every once in a while they appear to almost like hang. It's kind of hard to describe it. Something just doesn't feel right inside here. And also a little chunks of black something have been falling out. I don't know if that's old grease that's coagulated and hardened into almost like a rubbery substance or what. But I do not hold out hope that I'm going to be able to properly clean out the garbage that's in this bearing. Furthermore, this shield, I kind of destroyed it trying to take it off. These are a lot harder to take off than they look. So even at best, even if I could clean this back up, at best I could repack it with grease, and probably only if I could maybe get this shield back on, have a shield on one side. So I think I'm just going to bite the bullet and buy replacement bearings. The other thing I noticed about these bearings is that these bearings also appear like they may have been spinning on the shaft. These also are not that tight of a fit now that I look at it and check it. So these have a number on them, a 5204 number here that is kind of worn, indicating almost to me like something's been rubbing up against that and it's been turning. So I don't know what quite to make of that. I am going to, just for the heck of it, I'm going to run a measurement comparison between these bearings and the Chinese ones. The OD on these bearings, 47 millimeter on the nose, maybe 46.98, and they're more like, I really should use a micrometer, but I'm just curious if these are that far out. And the Hoovers that were in here are the same, 46.99, so that's not different. So that's why these both seem to slip in there loosely. I'm wondering if these Hoovers aren't the original bearings. Remember, I already suspected that from the fact that one of these has shields on both sides and one doesn't. At least I think that's what I had discovered. So the bore on these is going to be 19.95 millimeters, 783 thousandths. And the Asian ones, here we go, 787 and a half thou. The point is, that slips on there crazy easy. That's the original. Well, I keep calling it original. It's original because it's the one that was in there when I took this apart. They're both, neither one of these are press fit onto here. That seems odd. It's going to be impossible to figure out what was in here for original bearings. Here's the one on the other side, and it's clearly marked 5204FF on the shield. And on the back side, there is another shield. Oh, and this one is marked 5204F with only one F. So I wonder if that denotes the same size bearing with only a single shield. Why would they have two different types of bearings in there? Makes no sense. It's even more evidence that these are not the original bearings that went in this thing. Well, I poked around on eBay, and after searching, I decided on putting an offer in on these two new old stock Hoover NSK bearings, and the offer was accepted. I don't remember exactly what I ended up paying, but figure it was a pretty good deal. So these are 5204 ZZs. So the ZZ should mean the same as like an R2 or the FF on the original bearings. Should mean that they're sealed on both sides. There were no pictures of the bearings because they're new old stock in the package here. So we're going to check out whether or not that worked out the way I had hoped it would. There's one seal or shield. Yep. So that's exactly what I wanted to see. Shielded on both sides. They are true to old stock bearings. They've got some stiffness to them. But they should warm up. Actually, they're pretty cold actually from sitting down here in the basement, but I think they're going to be okay. And really there's going to be only one way to find out for sure, and that's to run them. So let's see what happens. Well, that's interesting. That one did not have this oil paper wrapping on it. It feels the same though. All right, let's see what happens. Again, very, very loose fit on these things, on the shafts. Not quite sure what's going to keep that from, not sure what's going to keep that shaft from wanting to just spin inside that inner race. Well, let's see what happens. It's interesting that that one goes in so tight. Doesn't want to start. Alright, wired up that start winding. Alright, let's try that again. Something's wrong. Alright, figured out where my bad connection was, and now I should be able to just momentarily touch this to get it to start. I think that sounds better. I think I can live with that. It'll probably just get better the longer it runs and the more that grease gets to move around. Yeah, after running for a few minutes, this loosened right up. So now this isn't, they're not real stiff like they were. I can even start it by hand now.